For us at Envision Utah to welcome to our forum discussion today the former governor of the state of Utah, also former ambassador to China, former ambassador to Russia, our former governor, Jon Huntsman Jr. And Governor Huntsman, thank you for joining us today.
Doug, it's great to be with you. You can call me whatever you want, because when I was on that darn radio program years before, that's what I got anyway.
We had some interesting conversations over the years.
Right?
Let's start with a question that you know is near and dear to our hearts here at Envision Utah, certainly near and dear to my heart. The balance in this great state between the rural needs of the state of Utah and fundamentally the Wasatch Front, the much more populated, the real urban areas of our state. What is your vision for the future of kind of a tale of two states that we have here in the state of Utah, rural and the very, very populated Wasatch Front?
Well, Doug, let me thank you and Ari for the work that you're doing, and particularly for those who are doing so much under the Envision Utah banner. I had the great honor of chairing Envision Utah back in the late 90s, and I learned a lot of important lessons about growth and how we take the word out with respect to growth, how local communities are educated, how they get access to tools and information that better prepare them for the future. Everybody wants to make the right calls as we go forward, but you need the tools, the demographic trends, the economic trend information that Envision Utah has been able to do. So our hats off to you. Listen, our goal in this state should be to allow all of our citizens to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, whether they live in the Wasatch Front or whether they live in our rural communities. You know, you don't have to grow up in our rural communities to love them. Many of us are just a generation or two removed from rural communities, and spent time there visiting, growing up, learn how to shoot guns here, catch a fish, learn new vocabulary in the English language. And they're a critically important part of what we do. But here's what I think we probably need to do when we look at our state going forward. And I think Envision Utah is in a position to play a critically important role here. And that is to reflect on where we have been over the last couple of months. Because I don't think we should be expecting just a recovery. That's not what's going to happen. I think we should expect a recharge, a rebirth. We have learned so much about life in the last 2 months, how we deliver education, how we telework, how we commute ourselves, how we treat our neighbors and our fellow Utahns. And I know it's put great stresses and strains on everybody, but I think we're coming out of this a lot better and smarter. And I think it should inform our future. So our goal as we move forward, I think, should be nothing less aspirational than Utah as the crossroads of the world, a state that has the best, the finest quality of life in the country. And I don't care, again, whether you're living on the Wasatch Front or whether you're living in a rural community, because they all have things that are great. They all have challenges that need to be worked on. But we're going to feel stresses and strains from growth going forward. Whatever the demographic forecasts we have seen, I think probably need to be thrown right out the window. I think we're going to see an onslaught of people moving into the state. This will affect urban life. It will affect rural life, for good and bad. Coming out of cities, coming out of states that maybe have not managed through the crisis in ways that people like. Cities that are being overrun with crime and little economic opportunity. States that have completely priced themselves out of the marketplace. So the trends ahead that we ought to be looking forward to when we look at opportunities in rural areas along with urban areas is an influx of people. I think that's what we're going to have to deal with. And so the demographic trend of 1 million people over the next 10 years and doubling the state's population by 2050, I think is completely gone. So what we should hope for, our goal should be in our rural communities to bring the same prosperity to our rural communities as we have along the Wasatch Front. Because that's the complaint I hear endlessly. People give it lip service, people talk, and we have had nothing in terms of an uplift in real opportunities. Well, how is it that we get that? I think we have to ensure that, recognizing that agriculture is 20% of our state's GDP, it's as large as technology, it's critically important to our future. We're going to need to continue that, obviously. These are the producers. These are the people who are going to carry us out of the recession first. They're the ones who are keeping our supply chains, our supply lines open so we can survive. We need land, we need water, we need labor to make any rural opportunities work. We need more in the way of STEM education and technology that's brought into rural communities. I believe that as our local companies, not just Silicon Slopes, but beyond, as they look to expand and diversify their own economic base, they should be looking at our great rural communities for those purposes. But that's not going to happen unless we have broadband, energy, transportation, healthcare, training opportunities. We're always going to have to keep our eye on the ball there so that we can reach the goal of a level of prosperity in our rural communities that are equal to what we have along the Wasatch Front. Not equal outcomes. That's not what I'm calling for. I'm just looking for equal opportunities. And then let people pursuing life, liberty, and happiness make the choice about where they want to live.
I don't want our participants to think that in any way we are missing education. That is a huge, huge issue here in the state of Utah. I've heard it discussed in every legislative event that I've ever covered. I've heard it talked about in every gubernatorial race that I can remember. And maybe in the about 3 minutes that we have left, Jon Huntsman, perhaps you could give us your vision for where education needs to go here in the state of Utah.
You don't have to have been governor of this great state before to have an appreciation for our schools, our teachers, our administrators, because you visit about every single one of them when you're governor. And you walk away from that experience with the same conclusion that I've drawn raising 7 kids. We've homeschooled, as everybody in the whole state is doing right now, by the way. And I think we're learning some really important lessons about creative ways to deliver education to our homes. And places that are not the traditional bricks and mortar. We've done homeschool, private school, public school, international schools, military academies. I think I've seen it all. And I walk away with this impression. Every student enters the classroom differently. They have a different aptitude, they have a different mentality, they have different strengths and weaknesses. And until we have a marketplace of options that will suit those different learning styles, we're going to fall short in finding that genius within the individual, which is exactly what we should aspire to. So on the public ed front, a quality classroom for all and a great teacher. And that means a teacher that needs to be compensated. And Envision Utah has done some terrific work in terms of what we must do to up our game in terms of teacher compensation. That has to happen. But also technology in the classroom that allows kids to learn their own way, their own style, at their own pace. Focusing heavily on early years of knowledge acquisition is important, and the back end in terms of better and stronger relationships with our universities and our technology training providers, so that kids can sub-matriculate as they're in high school and ready to perform once they get out. Higher education, let's take a lesson from what we're doing today. Why is it that we're charging the same for online learning as we are for people sitting in the traditional bricks and mortar classrooms? We need to look at costs and we need to look at access opportunities, particularly in our rural areas, to up our game in terms of how education is provided, knowing that it is the one great leavener in society, regardless of where you're born or where you've come from, that will give you opportunities to succeed.
Governor Huntsman, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back here in round 2 in just a few moments. It's a pleasure for us here at Envision